At midnight, my wife whispered, "Never ask about that night." Her voice trembled like it came from a dream she couldn't wake from. I turned to her, half asleep, half afraid. "What night?" I asked. She didn't answer, only pressed her hand to my chest, eyes wide open in the dark. "If you love me, Albert, just don't." The clock ticked past 12:01. Silence filled the room like smoke. I lay there listening to her uneven breathing, feeling that sentence crawl under my skin. Never ask about that night. By morning, she acted as if it never happened. She made coffee, hummed an old tune, kissed my forehead before heading to the garden. Normal. Too normal. But the universe has a cruel sense of timing. That evening, while checking emails on her old laptop, I saw one message in bold red. "You deserve to know what your wife did that night." No sender name, no subject, just an attachment titled Ward 1998. My hand hovered over the mouse. I heard Helen's voice again, echoing in my head. "Don't ask." But curiosity is louder than fear. When I clicked it open, the screen flashed, a single image, grainy but unmistakable. Helen, standing beside a man I buried 25 years ago. The morning after that email, sunlight felt dishonest. Helen was in the kitchen, humming softly, as if nothing had happened. Her hair, silvering at the roots, caught the morning glow. She turned, smiled, too steady. I watched her stir sugar into her coffee, my mind replaying the pixelated image from last night. The man beside her, Ethan, my best friend, my dead best friend. We met in college, back when everything was simple. Helen was the quiet girl who smelled of lavender and library dust. And Ethan, he was the loud one, the kind who could make a funeral sound like a carnival. We were inseparable, three souls tied by curiosity and caffeine. In the summer of 1998, everything changed. Helen and I had just gotten engaged. Ethan had landed a job overseas but stayed behind for one last weekend. We went camping near Greenfield Lake. It was humid, moonless, filled with mosquitoes and laughter. I remember the firelight on Helen's face, the way she leaned against me and whispered, "Promise me you'll never stop asking questions, Albert." That was the last time I saw Ethan. He disappeared that night. His car was found abandoned near the old quarry. Police searched for weeks, but there was nothing. His parents blamed the terrain. I blamed fate. Helen, she blamed herself, though she never said why. She started waking at odd hours, murmuring to herself. Once I found her burning a page from her diary. When I tried to stop her, she screamed, "It's not your truth to keep," and then collapsed into tears. The doctors called it trauma-induced amnesia. She couldn't or wouldn't remember what happened after midnight that night. Years passed. We built a life from fragments. I chose peace over answers, love over suspicion. She healed, or seemed to, but that folder, Ward 1998, had her handwriting all over it. That night, after she went to bed, I opened the laptop again. The photo burned behind my eyelids. The date stamp read, June 12, 1998, 1:03 a.m., the night Ethan vanished. And in the corner of that photo, half hidden by the shadows of pine trees, there was a man in a police uniform. Name tag blurred, but I could read enough. W-A-R-D, Detective Ward. A name I hadn't heard in over 2 decades. Detective Ward was the kind of man who looked like he'd been carved from stone in cigarette smoke. I remember him standing under the porch light that night in 1998, rain dripping from his hat, notepad in hand, eyes sharp as glass. "Mr. Hayes," he'd said, "you're sure Ethan didn't mention wanting to disappear?" I told him no. Ethan had dreams, plans. He'd joked about being my best man. Disappearing wasn't his style. Ward scribbled something, then looked past me to where Helen sat, wrapped in a blanket. "And your fiancée, she seems shaken." "She found his jacket by the lake," I said. "She's been in shock since." He nodded slowly, but there was a flicker, something in his eyes that said he didn't buy it. Later that night, as I tucked Helen into bed, Ward's car headlights swept across the window. He was still there, still watching. For weeks he came by, always polite, always asking the same questions in slightly different ways. Had Ethan and Helen ever been alone that night? Had they argued? Did she seem different before the trip? I told him no each time. I believed it. I needed to. When they called off the search, Ward gave me his card. "If anything surfaces, anything at all, call me." Then he added, almost softly, Sometimes people hide the truth out of love, Mr. Hayes. Don't confuse that with forgiveness. I never called. Helen and I married 6 months later. Her smile was fragile but beautiful, like porcelain under candlelight. Life pushed forward. Clara was born. I built my firm. Helen taught at the elementary school. We became the couple everyone admired. 30 years of quiet devotion, no scandals, no noise, but the cracks had always been there. Little things. Her flinching when thunder struck, her hatred of photographs, the way she'd freeze whenever someone mentioned Ethan's name. And now, sitting in my study, I saw her handwriting again, neat, familiar, on the corner of that digital folder. Ward 1998. I zoomed in on the photo until the pixels broke apart. Ethan's face stared back from the darkness, older than I remembered, or maybe it was the light playing tricks. Helen stood beside him, her hand half lifted as if reaching out or stopping him. Then, beneath the image, a note appeared. Embedded metadata. Property of Detective M. Ward. Confidential evidence. I leaned back in my chair, the hum of the computer filling the room. My heart pounded with an ache I hadn't felt in decades. If this was confidential evidence, how the hell did Helen have it? The past wasn't buried. It was sitting in our home, humming softly in the next room, pretending nothing had ever happened. I stared at her through the doorway as she trimmed flowers by the window, sunlight haloing her figure. She looked peaceful, angelic even. But I knew now, angels can lie too. I didn't confront Helen that night. Confrontation gives the other person time to choose a mask. I wanted the face beneath. So I practiced a ritual of ordinary love. I warmed her tea, asked about her third graders, kept my voice low and my smile easy. And while she graded spelling tests at the kitchen table, I slipped into the garage and resurrected the old Canon camcorder from a plastic bin labeled Christmas lights. I charged the battery, wiped the lens, and told myself this wasn't betrayal. It was preservation. Of truth. Of us. The next morning I left early for errands and parked a street away from our house, line of sight on the front door. At 9:12 a.m., Helen stepped out in a blue cardigan, a cloth tote over her shoulder, the one she'd had since Clara's high school bake sale. She glanced once, twice, down the street like someone expecting a storm that hadn't yet arrived. Then she drove. I followed at a polite distance, the way you do when you're not sure whether you're hunting or being hunted by your own doubt. She took the river road, where willow branches curtained the water like secrets. After 20 minutes, she turned into a brick complex I'd never noticed. St. Bartholomew Hospice Residence. Hospice. The word hollowed me out. I parked behind a delivery van and watched her disappear through sliding doors. I waited 5 minutes, long enough to be ashamed and not long enough to stop, before I followed. The lobby smelled of antiseptic and lilies. A volunteer with kind eyes handed me a visitor sticker. "Who are you here to see?" I opened my mouth and almost said my wife. Instead, I scanned the whiteboard listing residents by wing and room. The names blurred until a single one snapped into focus like a photograph settling in a chemical bath. Ward, M, Arm 214, East Wing, Detective Ward. I thanked the volunteer and walked the East Wing with the slow certainty of a man following a path he'd pretended didn't exist. Room 214's door stood ajar. Helen's voice drifted out, soft as carded wool. "I kept it like you told me. All these years." A gravelly reply. I inched closer, my shadow gathering along the linoleum. "I told you to destroy it, Helen," the voice said. "Evidence is a blade. In the wrong hands." Coughing cut the sentence. "It carves the innocent first." I pressed my eye to the gap. Ward lay in the bed, thinner than a rumor, a tube tapping at his wrist. The scar on his cheek, a crescent I remembered from the old days, had faded to a pale question mark. Helen sat at his side, coat folded on her lap. She was holding a small thumb drive, the kind offices give away at conventions. "I couldn't," she whispered. "I thought I'd need it if he ever asked." He. Me. Ward's eyes slid toward the door. I jerked back into the hall, pulse rattling. When I risked another glance, Helen had tucked the drive into her tote and leaned forward, voice barely air. He saw the photo, the one from that night. Ward's expression didn't change, but the line of his jaw hardened. Then truth has already chosen its price. "Do I tell him?" she asked. Ward turned his head toward the window, where a winter sun lay like a thin blanket across the sill. Tell him enough to spare his heart, he said, but not enough to hand him to wolves. My throat closed around a dry, ridiculous laugh. Spare my heart. I wanted names and nights and why a dead man smiled in a photo stamped 1:03 a.m. A nurse rolled a cart past and I stepped away too quickly. The wheels squeaked. Inside the room, Helen's chair legs scraped. I retreated to the corner and counted the beat of my pulse until it sounded like footsteps. When she emerged, her eyes were red but clear, the clarity of someone who's rebraided an unraveling line. We almost collided. Albert? She said, surprise breaking across her face in constellations. Shock, fear, relief, calculation. What are you? I came to donate, I lied, pointing at a brochure stand as if it were a compass and I, a man merely lost. Ran into Mrs. Kemp from church, her brother's here. Thought I'd... Her gaze searched my features the way a hand tests a locked door, then very softly, You followed me. Did I? I asked, ridiculous even to myself. She looked past me to the corridor, to Ward's door, to the volunteer desk. Her lips parted with a confession and closed on a secret. We'll talk tonight, she said. Please go home. About Ethan? I asked, the name tasting like metal. Her fingers tightened on the tote. About the truth, she said, and walked away before I could decide whether those words were a promise or a sentence. I waited until her footsteps dissolved, then slid back to room 214. Ward watched me enter with the tired amusement of a chess player who recognizes a pattern 5 moves too late. Mr. Hayes, he said, voice like paper. You've aged better than my conscience. I closed the door. You sent the email. He coughed out something almost like a laugh. Son, I've been fighting my lungs all week. Email's a younger man's weapon. He gestured to the chair. Sit. If you plan to drown, choose a comfortable lake. I remained standing. Did Helen help Ethan vanish? Did you? Ward studied me, then the ceiling, as if the truth were scrawled up there where only dying men could read it. Your wife saved someone that night, he said, and ruined herself to do it. Saved Ethan? Saved you, he said, and the floor tilted. From what? Ward's eyes dimmed, then sharpened with the stubbornness that keeps old cops alive through winters. From a story that would have eaten everything you loved. Sometimes you don't need the whole truth. You need the right piece. I leaned in, both hands pressing the bedrail. I buried my best friend 25 years ago. In my head, if not in the ground. Now he's alive in a photograph. Give me more than riddles. Ward's breath whistled. He pointed at the bedside table. A leather notebook lay there, edges frayed, a rubber band strangling its middle. Open to June 1998, he said. But don't take it. If Helen kept the blade, I kept the sheath. I slid off the band and flipped. June 12 stared back at me in neat block letters. 1:03 a.m. Photo secured. Witness, H, in shock. Subject, E, cooperative. 1:27 a.m. Transfer route changed. Unmarked sedan rerouted to Quarry Road. Officer interference suspected. 2:11 a.m. Decision made. Protect H at all costs. Evidence sealed. 3:02 a.m. New name issued. E. Leaves. The words pulsed. Officer interference. New name. Evidence sealed. I looked up. Who interfered? Ward closed his eyes, and for a second I thought he'd slipped away. Another door closing on me. Then he opened them again, small and fierce. A man who still wears a badge, he said, and a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. The hallway speaker chimed visiting hours ending. The nurse returned, and Ward lifted a trembling hand to dismiss me. One more thing, he said, voice thinning. If you love her, ask gently. Truth bruises easier than you think. I left with the notebook's ink ghosts haunting my palms and the camcorder footage waiting on my passenger seat. 43 minutes of Helen walking into hospice with a secret and out with a choice. That night I set the camera on our bookshelf, lens no bigger than a thumbnail, blinking its red dot into the dark. Not to catch her lying, to catch the moment she couldn't carry it alone. When Helen came home, she placed the tote on the table and poured 2 glasses of water as if we'd run a marathon in different cities. She sat across from me and held my eyes like a pen hovering above an unwritten letter. Ask, she said. And I did, because curiosity is louder than fear, and love, sometimes, is just a better question. Where was Ethan at 1:03 a.m.? I asked. And why were you with him? Helen's answer didn't come as words. It came as a small, trembling hand reaching into the tote and setting a thumb drive between us like a lit match. Because, she whispered, you weren't supposed to die that night. For a moment I couldn't breathe. You weren't supposed to die that night. Her words were soft, but they hit like an open palm across time. The kitchen clock ticked too loudly. The hum of the refrigerator sounded like a confession. I stared at the thumb drive resting between us, its black plastic reflecting her trembling fingers. Helen, what are you saying? She didn't look at me. Her eyes fixed on the small scar on my wrist, a relic from a camping accident 25 years ago, the same night Ethan disappeared. I've lived with that sentence for half my life, she whispered. Every time I close my eyes, I see the headlights, the curve of the road, the sound of brakes. She stopped, clutching her chest as if the memory still burned inside. That night, you and Ethan argued. You don't remember, do you? I frowned. We didn't argue, we were drunk, joking about. You did argue, she said, voice trembling. Ethan told you he'd found something. Something that could destroy the company you both worked for. He wanted to expose it. You told him to drop it, for your safety, for ours. But he wouldn't. And when he left the camp, you followed him. I blinked, trying to piece together a night erased by whiskey and fear. No, that can't be, Helen's voice broke. You were drunk, Albert. You don't remember getting into your truck. You don't remember chasing him down that dirt road. I stood so fast the chair screeched. Enough. She didn't flinch. Her eyes glistened, not with fear but pity. Ward found your truck the next morning, front bumper dented, blood on the fender. He knew what happened before you did. My chest went cold. That's impossible, I muttered. I would never... You didn't mean to, she said quickly. You didn't even know. Ethan ran into the road. It was raining. You hit him. The room spun. My throat closed like a fist. Ward's words from earlier echoed in my head. Your wife saved someone that night, and ruined herself to do it. Helen took a breath, every syllable fragile as glass. Ward helped me. He made it disappear. He moved Ethan, changed his identity, filed a false death report, said it was the only way to protect you. And Ethan too. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. So Ethan's alive? He's been alive all these years? She nodded. Ward sent him away under a new name. Witness protection, unofficially. There was corruption inside the department. Someone wanted Ethan silenced. Ward traded your guilt for Ethan's life. I sank into the chair. The air was heavy with something darker than grief. The weight of a truth you prayed wasn't yours. Helen slid the thumb drive toward me. Ward kept the footage. The dash cam. I took it before they could destroy it. My hand shook as I picked it up. It felt small, harmless, but I knew, inside it was the night my life split in two. Why now? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Why tell me after 25 years? Because Ward is dying, she said. And when he's gone, the secret dies with him. I couldn't let that happen, not without you knowing. She looked at me then, tears streaking the truth down her face. You think I lied to protect myself, but I lied to protect the only man I ever loved from becoming his own executioner. My jaw tightened. The righteous part of me wanted to be angry, to shout about trust, about choice, but the human part knew she was right. I looked down at the drive again. It might as well have been a gun on the table. What happens if I watch it? I asked. Helen hesitated. Then everything we've built ends. Maybe us, too. I stared at her, this woman who'd lived with a corpse of a secret for half her life, and realized she wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was asking for permission to keep surviving. The house fell silent. Even the clock seemed to hold its breath. I'll watch it, I said finally. She closed her eyes. A tear slipped free, tracing 25 years of pain down her cheek. Then Albert, she whispered, be ready to meet the man you really were. I waited until Helen went upstairs. The house settled into the kind of quiet that has shape and weight, the kind that can sit in a chair across from you and watch. I closed the curtains in the study, slid the thumb drive into the laptop, and braced myself against the desk as if the screen might kick. A folder opened. Watch Ward 1998 dashcam. One file. June 12, 1998, 001, MP4 length 01406. My finger hovered. Then I pressed play. Static. A windshield smeared with rain. Wipers laboring like old lungs. The camera faced the quarry road, gravel spitting under tires, a pine tree's black fingers raking the sky. The dash timestamp flickered, so 1:01:12 a.m. A voice, mine, slurred, barely recognizable. Ethan, hey, Ethan, come on, don't be stupid, pull over. The cam was mine then. The old pickup, a young man's anger wearing my throat. Headlights carved a moving tunnel. Up ahead, a pair of taillights bobbed, Ethan's sedan fishtailing on wet dirt. He was ahead of me. He was afraid. I paused. My own pulse thudded in my ears, echoing the wipers. I could end this. Power the laptop off, walk upstairs, choose oblivion. But curiosity is louder than fear. I hit play again. 01:02:43. A curve. A deer leapt. White flash. Gone. Ethan's brake lights flared, so did mine. The truck skidded sideways, the camera jolted, and the horizon jackknifed. Curses. Mine. Then the crunch of bumper against something not made to be struck. The picture hiccuped. For a second the frame went black, then light returned in a nauseous sway. A figure staggered in the beams. Ethan. Arms up, soaked, mouth moving. I could hear only my own breathing, heavy, panicked. Don't do this, Al. His voice came faint through the rain, the mic rough with the storm. They're listening. They're already listening. I jolted. They? A radio crackled from the passenger seat, the old CB I'd mounted for weekend fishing trips. A man's voice, clipped. Official. Unit 6 en route. Stand by. Quarry access confirmed. Another voice cut over, lazy, smiling in the vowels. Negative. I'll handle. Don't need a choir for one song. I hadn't noticed in 25 years, but I heard it now, the second voice, the smile that didn't reach its eyes. 01:03:11. Ethan stepped into the lane, palms open as if he could stop the truck with apology. The lens caught everything, the sheen of rain on his lashes, the way his jaw shook with cold and conviction. Albert, listen to me, Ethan said. They found out about Hale Chem's dumping. Ward's got a lead. But someone in the department, he's dirty. He's coming. You need to take Helen and disappear for a few days. Let Ward move me. Then the sound that lives in nightmares. The slip of a foot on wet rock, a misjudged step, the sick, low thunk of metal kissing bone. The frame lurched forward, the truck rolling, hood scooping him. His body hit and tumbled off the side, into darkness. I swayed. The room dimmed around the edges. All the air went out of the house. The camera kept recording, my door flinging open, my breath a screamed prayer. The dash view froze on the rain, while somewhere just out of frame, I became the kind of man I swore I wasn't. Helen, I heard, my voice hoarse, cracking, as if calling for a future to come save a past. Headlights washed the scene from behind, another car climbing the road. A cruiser. The left brake light was spiderwebbed, a thin crack bleeding red. The camera caught the plate in a blink, K7L29. The cruiser stopped crooked, gravel spitting. A silhouette stepped out, broad shoulders, hat low. Evening, the man drawled, the word oil slick. Looks like you boys had a spill. A flashlight beam sliced the night. The officer's hand hovered near his holster, not in fear, in ownership. Then another car arrived, fast, wrong, Ward's unmarked sedan. He slid, door half open before the tires stopped. He sounded young, hard edges and breath. Back off, Connolly, Ward snapped. This isn't your scene. Connolly. The name went through me like a current warming a long-dead nerve. The flashlight tilted. Everything's my scene if I say so. A pause. Well, if it isn't the good detective, looks like your witness found trouble. Ward moved into camera frame, just his side and shoulder catching the edge. He bent out of sight. Ethan, he hissed, can you hear me? A wet cough. A small, gasping miracle. Ethan was alive. Then another voice, Helen's, piercing me from 25 years away. Albert! She ran into frame, hair soaked, sweater plastered to her arms. She knelt beside whoever I was. What did you do? No, don't answer, don't say a word. Connolly's beam found Helen. He smiled without light. Well now, look at that. Wife arrives like a confession. Ward stood and stepped into the flashlight's spill, eyes flint. Officer Connolly, you are off this call. I'll file it. Connolly's hand rested fully on his weapon. You'll file nothing. I'll file a collision report that ends careers. Or, he let the word hang, tasting it. We can call it a mercy. Man stumbled in the rain. Happens. Helen rose, spine straightening into someone I'd never let myself see. What do you want? She asked. No tremble. Only calculation. A ledger opening. Connolly didn't blink. Ethan Mercer disappears tonight. For good. Your husband goes home sober. And I get a piece of Ward's file on Hailchem, enough to bury it. Silence. Rain hissed. Ward's breath dragged in and out like a saw. I heard myself pleading, pathetic, drunken, none of it useful. Helen turned to Ward, then to the lens, as if she knew a future would watch her. Can you move Ethan? She asked. Ward swallowed. I can. I'll change him out. Name. Root. I'll make him a ghost. Helen faced Connolly. You don't touch my husband. She stepped into the light, shoulders squared. Take me. The frame shook, Ward's elbow hitting the dash as if the camera itself recoiled. Don't be insane, Ward rasped off screen. Take me, Helen repeated, voice low. Write it how you want. I was driving. He jumped in front. I panicked. Whatever saves him. Connolly considered, a cat deciding whether the mouse has earned its life. Tempting, he said, but I prefer guarantees. He pointed the beam at the truck, at the dash, at us. You have a camera. Ward's curse hit like a slap. Hands scrambled. The video smeared into a smear of knuckles, rain, light. Give it, Connolly said. Now. A struggle, brief, violent. The lens cracked a hairline crescent. Ward's hand filled the frame, yanking the cables. The sound distorted into underwater thunder. Then his voice, close to the mic, a promise aimed at the future. I'll seal this. I'll save you both, but this tape will never see daylight. The picture went black. The counter ticked to 001406. End. I stared at my reflection in the black screen. An old man's face layered over a young man's crime and a woman's impossible bargain. From upstairs, floorboards groaned. Helen moving toward a bed she'd shared with a stranger even I didn't know. I rewound the last 10 seconds and listened again to the way she said, take me. Not dramatic, not noble, practical, precise. The way you step between a bullet and the person you've decided is worth your life. I ejected the drive. My hands shook so hard it clicked against the desk like a tooth. Connolly, a badge that still patrolled this town, a smile that never reached his eyes. I stood, the chair scraping the rug like a starting gun. The footage hadn't just rewritten the past, it had drawn a straight line into the present. Tomorrow I would find Officer Connolly. Tonight I had to face the woman who kept me alive by turning herself into a lie. I climbed the stairs, every step a verdict, every breath a reborn debt. At the bedroom door I paused. Helen's silhouette lay still in the bluish dark. Albert? She whispered without turning. Did you watch it? Yes, I said. My voice sounded like Ward's notebook, creased, used, still holding. I met the man I was. And? Her question floated there, asking if I would choose punishment or gratitude, justice or love. I swallowed. Tomorrow, I said, we stop being afraid of this. I pictured a cracked taillight, a plate number, a badge. Together. Helen exhaled a sound that wasn't quite relief and wasn't quite sorrow. Then be ready, she said into the dark, because the truth we kept has teeth. Morning came like a lie. Helen brewed coffee as if the world hadn't cracked open the night before. She moved slowly, deliberately, like someone performing the choreography of a life already dead. I watched her from the kitchen doorway. The air smelled of roasted beans and silence. You didn't sleep, she said, not turning. I met Connolly, I replied, in the video. Her shoulders tensed, the spoon pausing mid-stir. Then you know why we can't touch him. He's still on the force. I took a step forward. He's a murderer wearing a badge. He's untouchable, she whispered. Ward tried once, cost him his career. You think you'll survive that? I survived you lying to me for 25 years, I said. The words were sharper than I meant, but they landed where they had to. Helen faced me then, eyes hollowed by years of restraint. If you go after him, he'll destroy you, Albert. He's built a life on keeping secrets like ours. I walked past her, grabbed my keys from the counter. Then it's time someone took us away. The police station hadn't changed much since 1998. Same faded posters on the bulletin board, same smell of burnt coffee and moral compromise. Connolly sat behind a desk in the back corner, thicker now, hair thinner, but that smile, the one that never reached his eyes, was exactly as I remembered it. "Well," he said when he saw me, leaning back in his chair, "if it isn't the ghost of Greenfield Lake. What can I do for you, Mr. Hayes?" I studied him. "You remember me?" "Hard to forget a man whose wife drove through my scene like a banshee," he said, chuckling. "Tragic night, that one." I laid the printed photo on his desk, a still from the dash cam. His cruiser's plate number, clear as daylight. His smirk froze. "Thought this might jog your memory." He didn't even blink. "You shouldn't have that." "You shouldn't have been there," I said. "That was an unlogged appearance, wasn't it?" "Hale Chem paid you to erase a witness." Connolly's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed smooth. "Careful, Albert. That's an old story no one wants to read again." "I already read it," I said, "on Ward's notebook. You interfered, and you let an innocent man vanish to keep a dirty corporation clean." He smiled then, slow, poisonous. "Ward's dead, or as good as... You think a dying man's notes mean anything? You think a little home video will stand up in court after 25 years? He leaned forward, voice dropping. "You don't understand how this works. People like me, we write history. People like you just live with it." I felt the heat rising, the 25 years of guilt twisting into something sharper. "You threatened my wife. You used her fear to save yourself." "I used her love," he said. "And she played along. Don't act surprised. She was protecting you, wasn't she? I gave her that choice." My hand slammed the desk. "You blackmailed her." He didn't flinch. "No. I gave her a deal. You got to keep your clean little life, your house, your daughter, your reputation. That's worth a secret, don't you think?" He stood close enough that I could smell the mint he used to hide rot. "Now be smart, old man. Forget this. Ward's gone, Ethan's gone. And soon, so will you." I turned to leave, but he added, almost gently, "Tell Helen she still owes me a favor." Outside, the air was razor cold. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened. There are moments in a man's life when morality and vengeance occupy the same seat. That morning, they both sat beside me. When I got home, Helen was waiting by the window. She saw my face and didn't ask. "He threatened you again," she said quietly. "He threatened us," she exhaled. Ward was right. Some truths bruise deeper than lies. "Then maybe it's time the bruiser gets bruised." She looked at me, a flicker of something fierce behind the exhaustion. "You can't go to the police." "No," I said, "but Clara can." Her eyes widened. "Our daughter?" "She's a journalist. She believes in justice more than either of us ever did. If Connolly's untouchable by the law, let's see if he's untouchable by the truth." Helen hesitated, then nodded slowly, a tear slipping free. "If we do this, we do it together." "For once," I said, "we will." As the evening bled into night, I opened the laptop again, not to erase the file this time, but to upload it. To Clara. Subject: The Night That Should Have Taken Me. Attachment: June 12, 1998, Doza 1. MP4. Message: You wanted a story that mattered. Here it is. When I hit send, I didn't feel guilt or fear, just a strange, quiet peace, like the moment before a storm breaks. Down the hall, Helen whispered my name once, softly, as if afraid the truth might hear her. "It already has," I said. They decorated the church hall with lilies and borrowed hope. 30 years, the banner read in looping gold script, as if ink could glue 2 decades of silence back together. Cousins set out deviled eggs, Mrs. Kemp tuned her ancient piano, and the pastor rehearsed a prayer about endurance like it was a sport. Helen wore a simple navy dress, the one she kept for school recitals and funerals. She looked beautiful in the way that forgiveness looks beautiful, distant, imagined. When she caught my eye, she offered a small smile, practiced and polite. We hadn't touched since the video. We had decided to stand together. We hadn't learned how to stand close. Clara slipped in late, hair in a bun, camera bag over her shoulder. No reporter's badge today, just our daughter's face built on worry and willpower. She hugged her mother first. Happy anniversary, she whispered, then met my gaze with the wordless question we'd all been breathing. Are we really doing this here? Yes. We intend to prove that the footage was manipulated and that the late Detective Ward conspired to frame Officer Connolly as part of a vendetta. Furthermore, financial records show payments made to Mr. Hayes through Greenfield Holdings, payments tied directly to Hale Chem. The implication, Your Honor, is clear. Extortion. He turned, eyes sharp. They blackmailed the very company they now accuse. My attorney, a weary local named Dorsey, stood next. The evidence you call manipulated was verified by 2 independent analysts, he said. The payments made under Mr. Hayes' name were part of a laundering scheme by Halechem, not for him. My clients are victims of fraud and intimidation. Reeves adjusted his glasses. Mr. Grant, are you alleging the defendants fabricated the footage entirely? Grant nodded. Yes, Your Honor, using AI and deepfake technology. The courtroom buzzed. The word deepfake had a modern chill. It made truth sound obsolete. Helen leaned toward me, whispering, They're rewriting the story. I whispered back, Then we'll write it louder. When it was our turn to testify, Dorsey called Helen first. She rose slowly, her voice trembling at first, but growing steadier with each word. I kept that secret because I thought love was supposed to protect, she said. But love built on silence rots. What you saw in that video wasn't fiction, it was fear caught on film. Grant stood. Mrs. Hayes, you expect this court to believe that my client, a decorated officer, orchestrated a conspiracy to, what, save your husband? No, she said softly, to save himself. He smirked. And yet you admit you lied for 25 years. Why should we believe you now? Helen met his gaze. Because lying felt lighter than living with the truth. But the truth doesn't need belief. It survives without it. Grant opened his mouth, but even Reeves looked moved. Let the witness step down, the judge said quietly. Outside the courthouse, Clara and Ethan were fighting their own war. From her laptop in the hallway, Clara traced transactions through encrypted databases, cross-referencing Ward's notes with current accounts. Got it, she whispered. Greenfield Holdings moved funds through 3 shell companies. Ends up here. Ethan leaned over her shoulder. Where's here? Clara grinned grimly. A political action fund. Citizens for Safe Industry. Guess who's on the board? Ethan's eyebrows shot up. Grant. And Connolly, she added. They used the same fund to bankroll this lawsuit. She hit send, forwarding the documents to Dorsey inside the courtroom. Back in session, Grant was pressing Reeves to dismiss our defense as unsubstantiated. But Dorsey's phone buzzed. He read the email, his face lighting up with the rare smile of a man who's found the knife's handle, not just the blade. Your Honor, he said, standing, new evidence has just surfaced. It appears Greenfield Holdings funneled corporate funds directly into a PAC chaired by the plaintiff and his counsel. The money trail is not 25 years old. It's active. The courtroom gasped. Grant's composure fractured. Objection. Overruled, Reeves said, leaning forward. Mr. Dorsey, continue. The defense submits that this lawsuit isn't about defamation. It's retaliation. Connolly's face reddened. That's a lie, he barked, half rising. Helen whispered beside me. The louder they shout, the closer we are. The judge's gavel hit the desk. Court is adjourned until morning. Both parties will review this new evidence. Grant gathered his papers with shaking hands. Connolly shot me a look that could have broken glass. Outside, Clara waited with her laptop bag and a smile that didn't reach her tired eyes. We just turned their weapon into ours, she said. I put an arm around Helen. Then tomorrow, we finish it. By dawn, the courthouse steps were a minefield of cameras and microphones. Reporters from Chicago to Atlanta had descended on Greenfield, turning our sleepy town into the nation's newest morality play. Inside, the air was sharp with tension. Halechem's lawyers whispered in corners. Grant paced like a caged animal. Connolly sat alone, hands clasped, jaw grinding, his confidence now replaced by something brittle and loud, fear disguised as anger. When the gavel fell, Judge Reeves looked more tired than before. This court has reviewed the supplemental evidence, he began. The documents submitted by the defense suggest ongoing financial ties between the plaintiff and Halechem Industries. We will proceed with final testimonies. Grant tried to object, but Reeves's stare shut him down. Mr. Hayes, the judge said, you may take the stand. I stood, feeling every one of my 58 years. The walk to the witness chair felt longer than the road to the quarry that night. Mr. Hayes, Dorsey said gently, Can you tell the court in your own words why you chose to release the footage? I took a breath. The truth no longer frightened me, it just weighed what was left of me. Because silence doesn't protect anyone. 25 years ago, I thought ignorance was mercy. I thought if I didn't know what happened, I could still love my wife, still live in peace. But peace built on lies isn't peace. It's anesthesia. I looked at Connolly. That man stole my memory, my friend, my family's safety, and turned them into insurance policies. Ward tried to expose it, and died carrying the guilt of everyone here. I won't let that happen again. Grant shot up. Objection, Your Honor. Speculative and defamatory. Overruled, Reeves said. Continue, Mr. Hayes. I nodded. You can take everything from me, my job, my home, my reputation, but you won't take her silence again. I turned to Helen. She spent half her life protecting me from the truth. I'll spend the rest protecting her with it. The courtroom stayed silent, a rare, sacred silence, the kind that listens. When it was Grant's turn, he had nothing left but bluster. This is a circus, he said, pacing. A desperate attempt by a family of admitted liars to rewrite history. Hale Chem has done nothing wrong. Officer Connolly has served honorably. And if the defense wants to sling accusations, they'll need more than ghost stories and grief. Reeves lifted the new folder Clara had unearthed. You mean this? Grant blinked. Your Honor, these are transfers from Hale Chem's discretionary fund, routed through Greenfield Holdings and deposited into your firm's escrow account, Reeves said. One totaling $80,000, 3 weeks ago. A ripple of gasps. Helen's hand found mine under the table. Reeves continued, voice cold. Unless you wish to explain this donation, Mr. Grant, I'd advise silence. For the first time, Grant's words failed him. He sat down, face pale as marble. Dorsey stood. Your Honor, we move to dismiss the plaintiff's claims with prejudice and open a criminal inquiry into financial misconduct by Hale Chem and its affiliates. Reeves nodded slowly. Motion granted. The gavel fell. The case that began with a whisper ended with a sound that could wake the dead. Outside, the sky opened into hard rain, the same relentless kind from that night 25 years ago. Connolly was escorted down the steps in handcuffs. Cameras flashed like lightning. One reporter shouted, Do you have anything to say, Officer Connolly? He glared at me through the rain. You think this ends with me? You think truth wins? I stepped closer, voice calm. Truth doesn't win. It outlives. They shoved him into the cruiser. The door slammed like punctuation. Helen stood beside me, soaked, trembling. But this time it wasn't fear. It was release. Clara hugged her, whispering, It's over. Ethan approached, his limp heavier but his eyes alive. Ward would have liked this ending, he said. No, I said softly. He would have called it a beginning. As the reporters swarmed, Helen and I walked down the courthouse steps together, hand in hand. The rain washed the dust from the old banner I'd brought with me, 30 years together. It fluttered weakly in the wind, gold letters bleeding, still legible. I thought about what love costs, and what it's worth when you stop keeping it on credit. 3 days after the verdict, Clara's exposé dropped. The headline was brutal in its simplicity. The Night Greenfield Sold Its Soul, by Clara Hayes. Within hours, it was everywhere. Front pages, podcasts, late-night panels. The footage from the church hall, the court transcripts, the bribe ledger, all of it, out in the wild. What started as one family's reckoning had become a national mirror. Dad, Clara said, phone in hand, eyes wide. CNN just picked it up. They're calling it the Greenfield cover-up. Helen stood by the window, half relieved, half terrified. Be careful what you free, sweetheart, she murmured. The truth doesn't come home quietly. Outside, the reporters came back, hungrier than before. Our mailbox filled with letters, some thanking us for exposing corruption, others accusing us of destroying a good man's reputation. Ethan sat at our kitchen table again, surrounded by coffee cups and chaos. It's spreading fast, he said, scrolling through his tablet. Former Hale Chem employees are coming forward, one's claiming they were forced to falsify safety reports in the late 90s. Helen frowned. That means it's not just about Connolly anymore. Ethan nodded. No, it's bigger now. So they're connecting it to statewide water contamination reports. I leaned back, the weight of it sinking in. So we opened the floodgates. Exactly, Clara said. And floods don't stop at property lines. That evening, Clara went live on a national news program. She sat under bright lights, hair pulled back, face calm but eyes sharp, the same eyes that once hid behind textbooks and birthday candles. The interviewer asked, "Your father and mother hid this secret for over 2 decades. Do you see them as heroes or accomplices?" Clara paused, perfectly measured. They were human. Humans make mistakes. But silence doesn't heal. Truth does. And sometimes healing means tearing out the infection first. The interviewer leaned in. "And Officer Connolly?" She didn't blink. "He wasn't the infection. He was the symptom. The system that created him. That's the disease." Helen turned off the TV halfway through, tears streaming quietly. "She sounds like Ward," she said. "God, she even pauses like him." I smiled faintly. Ward would have been proud. But for every voice praising Clara, there was another calling her a traitor. Anonymous emails flooded her inbox. Threats, slurs, offers of hush money. Someone leaked her address. One morning, a package arrived with no return label. Inside, a stack of shredded newspaper clippings and a note written in red marker: "You made enemies who never forget." Clara brushed it off, but Helen didn't. She started sleeping with the lights on again. "They won't touch her," I told her. "The world's watching." Helen gave a hollow laugh. "You think that stopped them last time?" Meanwhile, Hailchem began its counter-narrative. A PR video appeared online. Men in lab coats, smiling families drinking from water glasses, slogans about integrity and progress. One commentator sneered, "A grieving family, an old tape, and a dead detective, hardly credible." Another headline read, "Was the Greenfield scandal manufactured?" The spin worked, partly. Half the country believed us. The other half wanted to believe they couldn't be poisoned by the people they voted for. Clara refused to back down. "We go bigger," she said. "If they smear us, we show receipts." Ethan and I helped her comb through Ward's archives. Audio tapes, phone logs, transcripts. One recording caught our breath. "Connolly and a Hailchem exec, 2003. Exec. We need that file gone." Connolly. "It's handled. Hayes'll never find out." Exec. "You sure?" Connolly. "He's too busy being grateful." Helen covered her mouth, tears slipping through her fingers. "He used your guilt." I nodded. "And my gratitude." Clara looked up from the screen. "This one goes public next. No spin can fix that." Ethan shook his head slowly. "They'll try. They'll hit back harder than ever." Clara smiled, cold and fearless. "Good. Let them. Truth deserves a fight." That night, as thunder gathered over Greenfield again, the first protest signs appeared outside the Hailchem gates. "Clean water, clean hands." Ward was right. Hayes family equals courage. And on one homemade placard, smeared by rain, someone had written words that made my chest ache. "Silence is a luxury. Thank you for breaking it." Helen read it from our porch, clutching my arm. "Do you think it's really over this time?" I looked at the dark sky and the glow of distant sirens. "No," I said softly. "I think it's finally beginning." The week after Clara's expose aired, Greenfield stopped being a dot on the map and became a headline. Journalists swarmed our small town like vultures circling a battlefield, each chasing a new angle, a hotter headline, a louder villain. But for once, the noise was on our side. Clara's story hit a global nerve. Within days, environmental watchdogs in Europe and Asia began cross-referencing Hailchem's subsidiaries. The pattern was unmistakable: identical waste disposal contracts, falsified safety certificates, and payouts to mid-level officials who'd learned Connolly's tricks too well. CNN called it the Greenfield effect. The BBC called it America's poisoned silence. Helen watched the coverage with quiet disbelief. "We started this in our kitchen," she whispered. "Now the world's tearing down empires." Ethan nodded grimly. "That's what truth does. It grows teeth when it's hungry." The backlash came fast. Hailchem's CEO appeared on national television, his voice measured, rehearsed. "These allegations are built on coincidence and emotion. We remain committed to transparency." Within hours, Clara received a call from a blocked number. "Ms. Hayes," the voice said, low, deliberate. "You've done enough damage. Step away before someone gets hurt." She didn't tell us right away, but I saw it in her eyes, how the light behind her determination had shifted from fire to steel. That night, she double-locked her door and started wearing the small cross Helen had given her as a child. 3 nights later, someone slashed our mailbox open. A single photo was left inside. Clara walking home from the newsroom, a red circle drawn around her head. Helen's hands shook as she held it. "They're watching her," she whispered. I took the photo, looked at it, then burned it over the sink. "Then let them watch," I said. "They'll learn what it means to be seen." Ethan brought in 2 of his old contacts, retired investigators who owed Ward their lives. Together, they traced the threats back to an anonymous server in Delaware, Halechem's private cybersecurity contractor. "They're trying to scare her into silence," Ethan said. Classic intimidation move. "Then we turn it on them," Clara said, already typing. "If they're tracking me, I'll make them chase me in circles." By morning, she'd launched a digital campaign, had Ward was right. Within hours, thousands of whistleblowers and former employees began submitting their own evidence. Photos, reports, memos. Each one another nail in Halechem's coffin. But truth, like fire, consumes what it touches. A small local paper, the Greenfield Post, published an editorial calling us media arsonists and accusing Clara of fabricating evidence for fame. The author was an old friend of Connolly's. Helen read it at breakfast and set the paper down. "They'll twist anything to make us the villains," she said. "Then let them," Clara replied. "Every story needs one. As long as people keep asking why, we're winning." Still, I saw the toll it took. She barely slept, living on coffee and adrenaline. Helen started leaving tea by her door at night, whispering prayers when she thought I couldn't hear. Ethan stayed with us most nights, sleeping on the couch with a gun on the table. "You can't fight corporations with bullets," I said one evening. He smiled sadly. "It's not for them, Al. It's for what fear does to a man at 3 a.m. Then one morning, everything changed. A whistleblower from inside Halechem's headquarters leaked a trove of internal emails to Clara. The documents exposed a network of executives who had bribed politicians to suppress pollution reports across 5 states. One email, dated June 1998, stopped me cold. Handled the Hayes situation. Local officer compensated. No further action required. Helen read it twice, hands trembling. "That's the night Ward disappeared the evidence," she whispered. "They paid for you to forget." Clara's eyes burned. "Not anymore." She hit upload. Within hours, the emails were everywhere. On national broadcasts, Twitter feeds, international headlines. Stock markets dipped. Halechem's share price collapsed by 30% in a single day. The CEO resigned by sunset. That night, Helen and I sat on the porch, watching lightning flash over the hills. "Do you think Ward sees this?" she asked softly. "I think," I said, "he'd say it's about damn time. The world was finally listening. But truth, we were learning, doesn't end wars. It starts new ones. And somewhere out there, in the dark between headlines, we could feel the next counterstrike forming. Fame was never meant for us. It doesn't hug you when the cameras turn off. It swallows you whole." 3 weeks after Clara's global expose, the air shifted again. The tone of the headlines changed. Overnight, we went from heroes to suspects. The first blow came from a network that had once praised her. Leaked emails question authenticity of Hayes footage. Source who exposed Halechem admits to editing files. Helen dropped the remote, her face pale. "They're turning it on her again." Clara was already on the phone, pacing. "They're saying the timestamp on the files doesn't match the format used in '98. They're calling it manipulated." I frowned. "But we verified that with Ward's archives." "I know," she said, her voice breaking. "But they've released a forensic report, one of Halechem's own experts." Ethan slammed his fist on the table. "They're rewriting the crime scene, again." The next day, Clara's newsroom suspended her pending investigation. Her editor, a man who once called her the future of journalism, issued a statement distancing the publication from potential misconduct. She walked into our house that night carrying a box of her things. No tears, just silence. "I thought truth was enough," she said softly. "Turns out it needs good PR." Helen took her hand. "You didn't fail. You just scared the wrong people." Days blurred. Reporters stopped calling. Sponsors pulled out. The online mob turned savage, accusing Clara of staging the video, framing an innocent man, chasing fame. Ethan and I tried to defend her on smaller platforms, but the big ones had moved on. Halechem was winning the war of exhaustion. Then one evening, Clara's phone buzzed, a blocked number again. She answered before I could stop her. The same low voice as before, colder now. You had your moment. Stay quiet, or you'll join Ward. The line went dead. Helen sank onto the couch, whispering prayers. I took the phone, my jaw set. They want to bury her name under Ward's. Not again. Ethan nodded. Then we dig up the one person they can't silence. He meant the source. The anonymous whistleblower who leaked the emails. Through encrypted messages, Clara convinced them to meet, an accountant from HaleChem's internal finance team. We met him in a diner on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where truth feels safe because the coffee never changes. He was in his 40s, tired eyes, nicotine-stained fingers. They're framing you, he said without hesitation. The forensic report? Fake, written by their PR consultants. They use metadata from an unrelated file to claim tampering. Then prove it, Clara said. He slid a thumb drive across the table. Everything, the originals, the audit logs, even the memo from the CEO's office approving the smear campaign. They paid networks to plant doubts, to make you look like Ward, unstable, obsessed. Helen's eyes welled. He died for telling the truth. The man nodded. They wanted you to follow. He stood to leave, glancing toward the window. You didn't get this from me. And then he was gone. That night, Clara uploaded the new files with a single caption. They tried to rewrite history, so we printed the receipts. It exploded. Overnight, #Ward was right trended again. Networks that had discredited her scrambled to apologize. The same anchors who doubted her now called it the most significant environmental scandal of the decade. But the victory didn't feel like one. Clara stared at her screen, thousands of messages pouring in. Praise, hate, gratitude, death threats. They love me today, she said quietly. Tomorrow, they'll love the next outrage. Helen brushed her daughter's hair back. You don't fight for love, baby. You fight so people can't say they didn't know. Ethan raised his coffee. To knowing, then. I looked out the window. Reporters were back, but their flashbulbs looked softer this time, less like lightning, more like candles. Truth doesn't need fame, I said. It just needs a home to live in. Clara smiled faintly. Then let's build one. That night, she drafted plans for a new foundation, the Ward Project, dedicated to investigative journalists silenced by power. The storm that began in a kitchen had become a movement, and somewhere in the dark corner of a forgotten file room, I imagined Ward smiling at last. 6 months later, the story that began in our home kitchen arrived at the steps of the federal courthouse in Washington, D.C. The marble facade looked cold enough to erase history, but this time, history was the one knocking. Clara walked ahead of us, hair pinned back, suit pressed. She was no longer just a journalist. She was the face of a movement. Banners rippled across the plaza. The Ward Project, Justice for Greenfield. Helen held my hand. Her fingers were steadier now, though her pulse still trembled beneath the skin. It feels too big, she whispered, like the truth's grown teeth sharper than we meant. I squeezed back. It was never ours to control. Just ours to tell. Inside, the courtroom was lined with press. The Justice Department had merged multiple cases. HaleChem's corruption, Connolly's misconduct, Ward's cover-up, and the environmental crimes that spanned half the country, and at the center of it all sat the name that had haunted us for decades. Ward, Michael, posthumous exoneration hearing. The government's special prosecutor, a young woman with tired eyes and an iron voice, began her opening. Detective Ward devoted his career to exposing systemic corruption. For 25 years, his work was dismissed as paranoia. Today, the record will be corrected. Helen's breath caught. I felt her grip tighten. Clara sat at the witness table, waiting for her turn. When they called her name, she rose with the quiet gravity of someone who'd already lived through 100 trials. Ms. Hayes, the prosecutor began, can you confirm that the footage released to the public originated from Ward's personal archive? Yes, Clara said clearly. The files were preserved by my mother after the 1998 Greenfield incident. Ward's handwriting and digital signature were verified by forensic analysts from 3 independent labs. And what was your motivation for releasing this material? Clara's gaze swept across the courtroom. To restore a man's honor, and to stop pretending corruption dies just because its victims do. The prosecutor nodded. And your family, did they benefit financially from the release? No, Clara said. We lost everything for it. A ripple moved through the room, press scribbling, cameras clicking. Then came the defense. Halekem's new attorney, all silk and venom, stood with a confident smirk. Ms. Hayes, are you aware your publication caused a 40% drop in our client's stock price? Yes, Clara said evenly. It was a fair price for poisoning people, but the judge raised a hand. Watch your tone, Ms. Hayes. Clara smiled faintly. With respect, Your Honor, I've been quiet enough for a lifetime. Helen's tears came then, not of fear, but of pride. After Clara stepped down, the next witness stunned the room. Detective Ward's son, a quiet man who'd flown in from Arizona. He carried a small box, worn at the edges. Inside lay Ward's badge and a letter, written in 2006, never mailed. The judge read it aloud. If anyone ever finds this, tell Helen Hayes I kept my promise. I saved her husband, I saved Ethan, and I saved the truth, for later. I hope later finally comes. Helen bowed her head. I could feel her body shake with grief too long postponed. The prosecutor turned toward the bench. Your Honor, we request the record reflect that Detective Ward acted in accordance with his oath and at great personal cost. We move for full exoneration. Judge Danner, a woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, studied the evidence for a long, heavy moment. Motion granted, she said finally. The gavel fell once, and it sounded like redemption. Outside, the press swarmed us again, but this time the questions were different, less hungry, more reverent. Mrs. Hayes, one reporter asked, how does it feel to see Ward cleared after all these years? Helen smiled through her tears. It feels like breathing for the first time. Clara wrapped an arm around her, and for a moment our family felt whole again, even with the ghost still sitting beside us. But the day wasn't over. The prosecutor approached quietly, folder in hand. Mr. Hayes, she said, the Justice Department is reopening the Greenfield homicide case. We believe someone else was there that night, someone we've never named. I froze. Who? She hesitated, then handed me the folder. Inside was a grainy photo, a second cruiser, half hidden behind Connolly's that night. The nameplate was barely visible, but it wasn't Connolly's. It was Reeves, the same Judge Reeves who'd presided over our first trial. Helen's hand found mine again. Albert, she whispered, it's not over, is it? No, I said quietly, staring at the photo. It's just the truth's next chapter. The folder burned in my hands all the way back to the hotel. Helen didn't speak. Clara scrolled through her phone, the blue light reflecting in her eyes like restless ghosts. We sat in silence until Ethan broke it. Reeves, he said quietly. Ward mentioned that name once. Said he trusted him, one of the few honest judges left. Helen shook her head slowly. Ward didn't know. Maybe none of us did. The photo lay on the table between us. 2 police cruisers at the Quarry Road, June 12, 1998, one belonging to Connolly. The other marked with the same serial as Judge Reeves's old patrol car, back when he'd been deputy chief before his judgeship. Clara leaned forward. If Reeves was there, then he helped bury it. Ethan nodded grimly, which means the first trial wasn't just biased. It was built on rot. I rubbed my temples. He ruled for us in the end, though. Helen looked at me, her voice soft but firm. Maybe he had no choice. Maybe he was cleaning his conscience before the walls fell. The next morning we met the federal prosecutor at a small conference room overlooking the Capitol. Her name was Diana Lopez, sharp, patient, and exhausted in the way only honest people in government ever look. Mr. Hayes, she said, sliding open a case file, we've traced payments from Halekem's legal fund to a private account registered under Reeves's nephew. Offshore, the amounts line up exactly with the timeline of the 1998 cover-up. Helen swallowed hard. He took bribes. Lopez nodded. It appears so. We believe Reeves authorized the destruction of early case evidence and suppressed the internal review after Ward's suspension. He then leveraged his silence to secure his judgeship nomination. I exhaled. So the man who freed us was the one who trapped us in the first place. Clara looked up from her notebook. Are we testifying again? Yes, Lopez said. We'll reopen the hearing tomorrow. The Justice Department wants transparency. But I should warn you, this won't just exonerate Ward. It could shake the federal bench. Helen's voice trembled. Do it anyway. That night, I couldn't sleep. I went down to the hotel courtyard. the one with the old fountain that hadn't worked in years. Helen joined me, wrapping her shawl around both our shoulders. "He fooled everyone," she whispered. "Even us." I stared at the still water. He probably told himself it was for stability, for order. Men like Reeves don't see corruption. They see compromise. Helen leaned her head on my shoulder. "You think we'll ever stop finding ghosts?" I shook my head. "No. But maybe we can stop burying them." The next day the courtroom was packed again. Press, activists, senators pretending not to recognize each other. Reeves sat at the witness table now, his robe gone, his expression calm, practiced, hollow. Prosecutor Lopez began. "Judge Reeves, do you acknowledge receiving undisclosed payments between 1998 and 2000 from entities linked to Hailchem Industries?" Reeves didn't flinch. "No, ma'am. I acknowledge receiving consulting fees for legal seminars. Nothing illegal," Clara muttered under her breath. "They all call it consulting." Lopez continued, projecting the documents on the screen, bank statements, email correspondence, and one signed directive ordering closure of Greenfield inquiry per departmental discretion. Reeves's jaw tightened. "That's not my signature." Lopez smiled faintly. "Perhaps you should look closer." Helen stood. "I can confirm it," she said suddenly. The court turned to her. "Mrs. Hayes," the judge, another now, warned, "you're not under oath." "Then swear me in," she said. They did. She walked slowly to the projector, her voice trembling at first but growing stronger. "That signature, it's his. I saw it before. On the warrant they served to search Ward's home. The same slant in the R, the same flourish at the end. Reeves ordered Ward's arrest, then pretended to defend him. Reeves's composure cracked. You can't prove that." Helen looked him dead in the eye. "You already did." Gasps echoed through the chamber. The prosecutor stepped forward. "Mr. Reeves, under federal statute, you are being charged with perjury, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to commit fraud against the United States." Reeves's mask finally broke. "You don't understand," he shouted, voice trembling. "I kept the peace. You don't know what it was like. Hailchem owned everything. The police, the courts, the press. If I didn't play along, they would have ruined me." Helen stepped closer. "They ruined all of us anyway." Security moved in. Reeves's shoulders sagged. "Ward was right," he murmured, almost to himself. "He said truth always collects its debt. I just didn't think I'd live long enough to pay it." When they led him away, the silence in the courtroom felt holy. The ghosts were quieter now, but not gone. Never gone. Helen sat back beside me, her hand finding mine. "He confessed," she whispered, almost in disbelief. "No," I said softly. "He remembered." Clara wiped her eyes. "So what now?" I looked toward the flag above the bench, limp but unbroken. "Now," I said, "we stop surviving and start living." The last day of the hearing began with sunlight bleeding through the courthouse windows like mercy finally remembering how to find us. Helen wore the same navy dress she had on the night everything began, the night she whispered, "Never ask about that night." Now she didn't whisper. Now she was the one the nation had come to hear. Judge Danner's gavel fell. "Mrs. Hayes," she said gently, "you may proceed with your closing statement." Helen stood, small but steady, her voice soft enough to make the room lean in. "I spent 25 years hiding a secret that wasn't mine to keep," she began. "I thought I was protecting love, but I was only protecting fear. That fear became a language in our home, a silence we all spoke fluently." She looked toward the gallery where Clara sat beside Ethan, both holding their breath. "The night Ethan disappeared, I thought I was saving my husband. I thought justice could wait, but justice doesn't wait. It watches, and it remembers." Her voice wavered. Detective Ward remembered. He carried the truth like a wound he refused to let heal. I owe him my husband's life. We all do. She turned toward the empty chair draped with Ward's old badge. He was a good man, and we buried him in suspicion. That ends today. Then Helen did something no one expected. She stepped away from the podium and faced the judge directly. "I ask this court," she said, "not to punish the dead, but to teach the living, because silence isn't peace. It's slow poison. And truth is the only thing that cleanses what fear corrodes." When she sat down, the room stayed completely still. Even the air seemed unwilling to move. The prosecutor rose next, her voice trembling with conviction. Your Honor, on behalf of the Department of Justice, we move that Detective Michael Ward be formally and fully exonerated. His record shall reflect service without misconduct, and his family shall receive all honors denied to him in life. Judge Danner nodded once. Granted. The gavel fell, a single strike that carried 25 years of weight. Helen covered her face with her hands. Clara leaned forward, whispering, "It's over, Mom. It's finally over." I wasn't sure it was. Truth doesn't end, it just changes shape. But for the first time in decades, the shape it took wasn't grief, it was freedom. Outside, the courthouse steps were crowded again, but this time there were no jeers, no shouts, only applause. People held up signs with Ward's badge number, with Clara's article headline, with a single phrase that would follow us forever: "The night truth won." Ethan joined us halfway down the steps, his limp more pronounced but his smile easier. "Ward got his justice," he said. "Guess the rest of us should start figuring out what to do with ours." Clara laughed softly. "Maybe start sleeping?" Helen turned to her. "You've given the world its conscience back. Try to rest before it asks for another miracle." Clara looked at her mother, eyes shining. "I learned from the best." Later that evening, we returned to Greenfield. The town was quiet now, no reporters, no flashing lights, just the faint sound of frogs by the lake where everything had begun. Helen and I walked to the old quarry road. The rain had long washed away the scars of that night, but we both knew the ground still remembered. "I used to think this place was cursed," I said. "Now I think it's just honest." Helen smiled faintly. "The truth always was." We stood there for a long time. Then she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out Ward's badge, the one the court had returned to her. She placed it on a flat stone by the roadside. "For you, Mike," she whispered. "You carried us farther than we deserved." I added softly, "And now we'll carry it the rest of the way." The wind moved gently through the pines like a long sigh finally let go. That night, back home, I sat at my desk and opened a blank page on my old typewriter. The keys felt unfamiliar, but the silence didn't scare me anymore. I began to type. "Truth isn't a sword. It's a mirror, and the hardest thing you'll ever do is look long enough to see yourself in it." I paused, then added, "Family isn't about blood. It's about who stands beside you when the world stops believing you." Helen came into the room, hair loose, eyes soft. "Writing again?" she asked. I smiled. "Just leaving something behind for when the next person gets lost in the dark." She leaned down, kissed my forehead. "Then make sure you tell them how we found the light." I nodded. "I will." Outside, thunder rolled over Greenfield, but this time it didn't sound like judgment. It sounded like applause. You'd think when justice arrives, it comes loud. Sirens, gavels, fireworks. But no. When power dies, it dies quietly. Connolly's sentencing took less than an hour. The courtroom was nearly empty that day. No cameras, no applause, just a handful of tired faces and the echo of a name that once made people step aside. He sat shackled, his eyes sunken, his smirk gone. Just an old man who finally ran out of places to hide. The judge read the charges like a funeral prayer: obstruction of justice, evidence tampering, racketeering, bribery, and conspiracy to defraud the United States. "Do you have anything to say?" the judge asked. Connolly leaned toward the microphone. For a heartbeat, I expected arrogance, but his voice came out small, dry. "I did what everyone else did," he said. "I survived." Helen flinched. Clara's pen froze mid-sentence. The judge looked unmoved. "And now you'll survive 12 years in federal custody." The gavel fell. The man who once owned fear was now its tenant. As marshals led him away, he turned his head slightly, toward us. His lips moved. "You think you won," but the words didn't sting, because for the first time I didn't care about winning. I cared about ending. 2 weeks later, Hail Chem collapsed under its own weight. Congress launched a federal probe into corporate negligence, and what they found was a tapestry of corruption so intricate it could have passed for architecture. Executives fled overseas. The board resigned in disgrace. The company's stock plummeted to pennies overnight. Environmental task forces descended on every plant and waste site Hail Chem ever touched. Clara covered it all, from the cleanup operations to the class action lawsuits filed by families who'd lost children to contaminated water. Her articles didn't read like vengeance, they read like requiems. In one piece titled The Price of Clean Hands, she wrote, "Justice doesn't resurrect the dead, it just teaches the living how not to bury truth with them." It went viral in hours. Meanwhile, in Greenfield, the lake began to heal. The EPA trucks came and went, leaving behind fresh silt and the faint smell of chemicals finally fading. Fishermen returned for the first time in years, throwing their lines into water that no longer looked like guilt. Helen and I would walk there some evenings, hand in hand, saying little. We didn't need to. The silence between us was no longer heavy, it was earned. One evening I asked, "Do you ever think about him?" She knew who I meant. "Every day," she said softly. "Not what he did, what he gave up to save us." Ward's life was small in the eyes of the world, but enormous in what it carried. I nodded. "He believed in truth more than safety." She smiled faintly, and now I understand why. Connolly's name disappeared from news cycles within months. The world had moved on to new scandals, new monsters. But sometimes, late at night, I'd think about his last words. "I survived. He didn't." The prison warden called Clara one morning. Connolly had died in his sleep, heart failure, no visitors, no family. He left behind one item, a sealed envelope marked "To the Hayes family." Clara didn't want to open it. Helen did. Inside was a single photograph, one taken years before everything fell apart. It showed the three of us, me, Helen, and Connolly, standing outside the Greenfield station during a charity drive. Ward had taken the photo. On the back, Connolly had written, "You were right. Truth outlives." Helen stared at the handwriting for a long time, then folded it gently. "I don't forgive him," she said, "but I don't hate him anymore." Neither did I. Hate is easy. Letting go takes work. When the courts cleared Ward's name, the department held a memorial service for him, a small one but dignified. They added his name to the wall of fallen officers. Clara spoke on behalf of our family. Her voice carried through the crowd like something holy. Detective Ward once said truth bruises before it heals. He was right, but bruises fade. And healing, when it finally comes, changes everything. She paused, scanning the audience. He didn't die for nothing. None of them did. Helen cried quietly beside me. Ethan stood behind her, hand on her shoulder. After the ceremony, the department gave Clara Ward's Medal of Honor. She didn't keep it. She donated it to the Ward Project, the foundation she'd built to protect journalists and whistleblowers. When she handed it to the board, she said, "This isn't about me, it's about what silence costs." The room applauded, but Helen didn't. She just smiled, proud and broken in the same breath. That winter, Greenfield's church reopened after years of disuse. The same hall where we'd once faced the town's disbelief now hosted community meetings and fundraisers for environmental reform. Helen was asked to speak at the dedication. She didn't want to, at first. "I'm no activist," she said. "I'm just a woman who learned too late." But when she stood at the altar, her voice carried through the rafters like a hymn. We spent years thinking truth was something we could lose, but it was here the whole time, waiting for us to be brave enough to open the door. Ward gave his life to protect it. Connolly lost his to deny it. And we get to live with it. That's not a curse, it's a gift. The crowd rose in quiet applause. I stood in the back, watching the woman who had once begged me not to ask about that night now teaching a town how to face the light. When the applause faded, I stepped outside. The air smelled of rain again. The streetlights reflected off wet asphalt like faint stars. I thought of Ward, of Connolly, of Ethan's limp and Clara's courage, of Helen's voice saying, "Never ask about that night," and how glad I was that I finally did, because sometimes the only way to save what you love is to break what you built to protect it. The years that followed were quieter, but not empty. Greenfield healed the way old wounds do, slowly, unevenly, but faithfully. The lake grew clear again. Children fished where warning signs once stood. People no longer crossed the street when they saw me and Helen. Some even stopped to talk, to thank us, to apologize for the years they'd believed the lies. Forgiveness, I learned, doesn't always sound like, "I'm sorry." Sometimes it sounds like, "Good morning." Clara's work took her far from Greenfield. She was invited to speak at universities, international panels, even the UN. Once she sent me a photograph from Geneva, her standing before a banner that read the Ward Project Global Summit. In her email, she wrote, "You always said the truth doesn't win. It outlives. I think we just proved you right." Helen printed that photo and framed it by the kitchen window. Every morning, she'd water her plants and look at it like a sunrise she'd helped build. But time, merciful, indifferent time, never stops moving, even when the soul wants to linger. One morning, Helen fainted while pruning her roses. The doctors called it heart failure. Mild, they said, but progressive. We didn't tell Clara right away. She was in Kenya, interviewing victims of corporate pollution, and Helen didn't want to pull her back. "I want her to keep building what Ward started," she said softly from her hospital bed. "That's what mothers are supposed to do. Push their children forward, not hold them back." I sat beside her, reading from her favorite book, though she wasn't really listening. Her eyes were fixed on the window where sunlight painted the curtains gold. "Albert," she said suddenly, "do you think truth is supposed to make us happy?" I thought for a long time. "No," I said finally. "I think it's supposed to make us whole. Happiness comes after that, if we're lucky." She smiled, faint and tired. "Then we were lucky, weren't we?" I couldn't answer. And my throat wouldn't let me. The next few months were gentle. We moved slower, watched more sunsets, learned that silence could feel safe again, not like hiding, but like resting. Every Sunday, Helen and I would walk to the memorial garden behind the old church. They'd planted a row of trees there, each one for a life lost to the Hale Chem spill. One tree stood taller than the rest, marked with a small brass plaque. Detective Michael Ward, Truth Outlives. Helen would place a single rose beneath it every week. She said it helped her breathe. Ethan often joined us. His limp had grown worse, but his humor hadn't dulled. "Ward's probably up there telling God how to run a tighter operation," he'd say, lighting a candle. Helen would laugh softly. "He probably is." Those small laughs, those were the real miracles. When Clara finally came home that summer, she found Helen thinner, paler, but still radiant. The reunion was tender and wordless. Two women who had carried the same burden, finally meeting without its weight. "Mom," Clara said one night, sitting by her bedside, "I used to think you were weak for staying silent, but now I know. You were strong for surviving it." Helen brushed her daughter's cheek. "Don't rewrite me, sweetheart. I was weak then, but the truth let me grow strong in the end." She coughed softly, then added, "Promise me something. Anything. When it's your turn to face something impossible, don't hide behind love. Let it stand beside you." Clara nodded, tears falling freely. "I will." Helen passed away on a quiet autumn morning. The leaves had just begun to fall. I was reading beside her, and when I looked up, her eyes were open, but peaceful. There was no struggle, just stillness, like a door finally closing after a long storm. Clara came home within the day. We buried Helen by the lake, next to the memorial trees. The townspeople came, faces familiar and unfamiliar, all softened by time. Even the new mayor came, and for the first time Greenfield's flag flew half-mast for someone who wasn't a politician. During the service, Clara spoke. Her voice shook, but her words were steady. "My mother taught me that love without truth is just fear dressed in pretty clothes. She died without fear. That's her victory." I didn't speak. I couldn't. I just watched the sunlight ripple across the water, the same light Helen used to call the forgiving kind. Months later, I received a letter. No return address, only a postmark from Arizona. Inside was a photo of Ward's son standing beside his father's restored gravestone. Beneath the image, he'd written, "Thank you for finishing what he started. The truth sleeps easier now." I placed it on my desk beside Helen's picture. Two faces, one who carried the truth into the dark, and one who carried it back out. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear Helen's voice, not in dreams, but in memory, the way she used to whisper, "Never ask about that night." Only now I hear it differently, not as fear, as permission. Last week, Clara called from Washington. The Ward Project had just received federal recognition as a non-profit advocacy group for transparency in law enforcement and corporate ethics. They were naming their new scholarship after Helen, the Helen Hayes Fellowship, she said, for journalists who refuse to stay silent. I laughed softly. She'd say, "You're making too big a fuss." Clara smiled through the phone. Then she'd secretly frame the certificate. Tonight, I sit at my desk, typing this for no one in particular. The keys click slow, old, familiar. The lake wind hums outside the window, and I can almost hear Ward's voice in it, gravelly but kind. Truth bruises before it heals. He was right, but now the bruises are gone. I close my eyes, thinking of Helen's last smile, of Clara's voice across continents, of Ethan's laughter echoing in the church hall that once held our shame. It's quiet now, the kind of quiet that feels earned. I whisper to the empty room, truth outlives. And for the first time in my life, I believe it. Prison doesn't start with the clang of a door. It starts with silence, thick, unfamiliar, the kind that used to follow when I lied. They put me in cell 42, a number that sounded like an equation no one cared to solve. The walls were pale gray, the cot hard, the light humming like guilt that forgot how to sleep. It's been, what now, 5 years since the sentencing. I don't count days anymore. Numbers don't measure regret, they just multiply it. The guards call me old cop. Some of them still recognize the name Connolly. They whisper when they think I can't hear. Used to be the law, one says. Now he's just another ghost with a badge in his past. They're right. I used to be the law. Then I became the excuse for it. I get letters sometimes, from reporters, from students, from people who want to make a documentary about the Greenfield scandal. I don't answer. What's left to explain? I lied, I silenced, I built my career out of other people's pain. But last year I got a letter that didn't sound like hate. It was from Clara Hayes. Her handwriting was neat, almost surgical. She wrote, "You were the first man I ever learned to fear. My mother taught me to forgive you. I'm still trying." She enclosed a photograph of the lake, clear, still, whole again. On the back she wrote, "The water forgave itself. Maybe you can too." I laughed when I read it, a bitter, cracked sound that startled the man in the next cell. Forgive myself. What does a man do with forgiveness when the people he destroyed have already moved on? Sometimes, in the middle of the night, I hear the rain hit the roof of this place, and it sounds just like it did that night, June 12th, 1998. I see the headlights. I hear Helen scream. I see Ward's eyes, cold, furious, righteous. He was supposed to die with his truth buried, but truth doesn't die easy. It waits. It hides in daughters, in old cameras, in quiet men who finally break. I tell myself I did it for order, for peace, for stability. But that's a lie I sold so often I started believing the receipt. No, if I'm honest, I did it for control. I liked being the man who decided what truth survived. Now I live surrounded by men who made the same mistake. Priests, bankers, mayors. We trade stories like cigarettes. They still think they were unlucky. I know better. I wasn't unlucky. I was cowardly. The chaplain visits once a week. He's younger than my crimes. He sits on the stool, Bible in hand, and says, "God forgives all who repent." I tell him I don't need God to forgive me. I need Ward to. He sighs. Then pray to him instead. So I do, not out loud, just when the lights go out. Mike, if there's any justice where you are, I hope you know I see it now. You were right. Truth bruises first, then it kills what needs killing. Maybe that's why it left me alive this long, to make me feel every inch of it. Sometimes I think I hear him answer, through the rain, through the hum of the lights, about time. Last month they moved me to the infirmary wing. My heart's failing. Ironic, isn't it? The thing I didn't use enough now gets to quit first. A nurse named Elijah brings me my pills. He's kind, which makes it worse. "You were a cop once," he says. "Must have seen some bad things." "I was the bad thing," I tell him. He laughs, thinking I'm joking. They always do. When he leaves, I pull the small envelope from under my pillow. The one they let me keep. Inside is the same photograph Helen sent, the one of the lake. I've stared at it so long I can smell the water. I imagine walking there again the way I used to patrol it before it all went wrong. Sometimes I picture Helen and Albert. I wonder if they ever speak my name. Probably not. But maybe, when the wind hits the lake just right, it carries a whisper of it. I don't want forgiveness. I just want to know they lived better after I fell. That would make the fall worth it. 2 nights ago, a thunderstorm rolled in. The whole prison went dark for 5 minutes. 5 minutes of absolute quiet. I sat on the cot, staring into nothing. For the first time, I wasn't afraid. I thought, so this is what Ward felt when he stopped fighting. Peace didn't roar in, it whispered. It said, "Now you understand." When the lights came back, I laughed, really laughed. Not bitter this time, just tired. The guard looked through the bars and asked, "What's funny?" I said, "Nothing. Just, the rain finally sounds like forgiveness." He shook his head, muttered something, walked away. But I kept laughing, because for the first time I wasn't the law, or the lie, or the monster. I was just a man, finally hearing the truth without trying to silence it. They say dying is like drowning, panic first, then peace. But for me, it's more like remembering. The body forgets how to fight, and the mind finally stops trying to lie. The doctors say I don't have long. The chaplain says weeks. The silence says soon. I spend my days by the window of the infirmary, where a thin line of rust marks the spot rain always finds. The air smells of bleach and ghosts. The prisoners who pass by my door don't look at me anymore. To them, I'm history, an old name from a scandal they read about and forgot. It's funny. The world moved on, but I'm still here, sitting in the echo. Last night, I dreamed of Ward. He wasn't wearing his badge. He was in plain clothes, leaning against a tree by Greenfield Lake. His arms were crossed, eyes softer than I remembered. "I told you truth would come back," he said. I laughed in the dream. "Yeah, you didn't say it would take 25 years to find me in a cage." Ward smiled. "You always were slow." He looked past me then, toward the water, where the reflection shimmered. There was someone else standing there, Helen. She wasn't young, but she wasn't the ghost I remembered either. She looked alive, peaceful. She didn't speak. She just nodded at me, a gesture so small and forgiving it nearly broke me awake. When I opened my eyes, I was crying. That morning, I asked for paper. The nurse brought me a pad and pen, thinking I wanted to file another complaint. Instead, I wrote a letter. It took me hours, but every word felt earned. To Clara Hayes, I don't know if this will ever reach you. I've spent a lifetime making sure truth didn't reach people, so maybe this is justice. I won't pretend to deserve forgiveness. I won't dress my choices in excuses. What I did to your family wasn't about duty, it was about fear. Your father scared me because he reminded me of who I used to be before I learned that power was easier than courage. I told myself I was keeping the peace. But peace built on lies is just war with nicer wallpaper. Your mother's eyes haunt me. She looked at me that night not with hatred, but pity. That's worse. Pity is what you give the damned when you've stopped expecting them to change. I wanted you to know, after the trial, I watched every interview you gave. I read every article. When you said truth doesn't win, it outlives. I realized that meant me too. I'm still alive because I haven't finished paying. If there's anything left in this world I can still offer, it's this. Use my name. Use it to remind people what happens when silence becomes law. Tell them about the man who thought control was justice and died alone trying to understand mercy. You once wrote that the water forgave itself. I hope you were right, because I'm still trying. J. Connolly. Cell 42. I sealed it, gave it to the nurse. If she ever asks about me, I said, send her this. He nodded, but I could tell he wouldn't remember. That's fine. The act of writing was the only absolution I needed. That night, the rain returned, hard, relentless, tapping against the window like an old rhythm I'd forgotten how to hum. I could barely breathe. Each inhale felt like glass. But for the first time, I didn't call for help. I just closed my eyes and listened. In the dark, I heard footsteps, 2 sets, Ward's and Helen's. They didn't speak. They didn't have to. The silence between them was clean now, rinsed of fear. Ward came closer. You ready? He asked. I tried to answer, but the breath didn't come. Only a smile did. Helen stepped forward, her voice soft. You kept running from the truth, John. But it waited. I nodded. I know. She reached out her hand. I didn't feel skin, just warmth, light, a kind of peace I hadn't believed in for years. Ward said, Then come on. Time to clock out. When the nurse found me in the morning, the window was open a crack. The rain had stopped. On the tray beside the bed was the letter folded neatly and the photo of Greenfield Lake. The water in the picture looked endless, still, forgiving. They buried me in the prison cemetery. No family, no words, no stone. Just a wooden marker with my number burned into it. 42. But a few months later, a woman visited. She left no flowers, no tears, only a small brass badge beside the marker, Ward's badge. The guard said she looked like someone who had forgiven the world, even if the world hadn't deserved it. He never caught her name. Somewhere beyond the noise of this earth, I imagine a lake. Ward's leaning against a tree again, and Helen's waiting beside him. When I get there, maybe they'll let me sit in the shade, quietly at the edge, just close enough to listen to the truth I spent a lifetime running from. And if heaven has mercy for men like me, maybe the rain still sounds the same, because in the end that's all I wanted, to hear it again. The sound of truth forgiving itself. 10 years after the verdict, Greenfield no longer smelled like guilt. The lake shimmered blue under the morning sun, clear enough that you could see the stones at the bottom. Children laughed on the shore, their voices carrying over the water, where once only silence dared to live. I was 70 now, old enough to forget names but not nights. My knees ached, my hands shook, but I still came here every year on the same date, June 12th. Some people visit graves. I visit the place where truth was buried and reborn. The air was gentle that morning, the kind of gentle you have to earn. I walked the path down to the pier, passing the old oak tree where Helen once tied ribbons for the memorial. The bark had healed around the fabric. Even the tree had learned to forgive. When I reached the end of the dock, I sat with my cane across my lap and looked out at the horizon. For the first time, the reflection that looked back wasn't a man weighed down by what he'd lost, but one who finally understood what he'd kept. Truth doesn't just outlive, it redeems. Clara arrived not long after, wearing her usual black coat even though the air was warm. She was older too now, her face softer, wiser, carrying that calm people only get when they've seen enough of the world to stop being afraid of it. She hugged me from behind, resting her chin on my shoulder. "You still come here alone?" I smiled. Not alone, just quieter. She handed me a folder, the Ward Project's annual report. I flipped it open, scanning the pages filled with photographs of young journalists, activists, investigators, each one with a story that could have been silenced and wasn't. "The Foundation's expanded," she said proudly. "We've helped fund 12 investigations this year, 3 international, all focused on corporate transparency." I chuckled softly. "Ward would have said you're giving the devil a headache." "Good," she said, her smile small but fierce. "He's had it easy for too long." She sat beside me, her feet dangling above the water like she used to as a child. "You know, I still think about him sometimes. About Connolly." "So do I admitted. "I think about how much of my life I spent hating him, and how strange it feels to outlive that hate." She nodded slowly. "His letter came after he died. The prison chaplain mailed it. I read it once, then buried it here." "Here?" She pointed to the edge of the pier. "Right there, between the cracks in the wood." I didn't want to carry it, but I didn't want to throw it away either, so I gave it to the lake. I smiled faintly. Then maybe that's why the water's so clear. We sat in silence for a while, the kind that feels full instead of empty. Clara leaned her head on my shoulder. "You know, I used to think truth was a weapon. Now I think it's a compass." "It's both," I said. "It cuts first, then points home." As the sun began to sink, the lake turned gold. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of wet pine and something older, something like grace. I whispered to no one in particular, "For you, Helen, for you, Ward, for you, Connolly." And maybe, just maybe, the ripples that moved across the water were their answer. A year after that visit to the lake, Clara convinced me to travel south with her, to Louisiana, where the Ward Project had just opened its first regional center. "You'll like it," she said, driving with the windows down and sunlight in her hair. They built it inside an old courthouse, said it felt poetic. Poetic, yes. Full circle, too. The center stood in what used to be a segregation-era courthouse, red brick faded with age, but the pillars gleamed white again. Inside, the walls were covered with framed photographs, reporters in war zones, whistleblowers who'd risked their lives, letters of gratitude written in trembling hands. At the front desk hung a single bronze plaque, the Ward Project. For those who told the truth and paid the price, Helen's name was beneath it. I reached out, tracing the engraving with my fingertips. "She'd laugh at this," I murmured. "She'd say you made her sound braver than she was." Clara smiled. "She was brave, Dad. She just didn't call it that." That afternoon, they held a small ceremony to dedicate a new journalism scholarship, the Helen Hayes Fellowship. The auditorium filled with young faces, hopeful and hungry. Some wore cameras, some notebooks, all carried the same quiet fire in their eyes. A young woman took the stage, dark-skinned, mid-twenties, with a voice that shook at first but grew stronger as she spoke. "My name is Naomi Carter," she said. "My mother worked for a chemical plant in Mississippi. She died because the company falsified its safety reports. I wouldn't have known the truth if not for the Ward Project. Because of them, her story, and hundreds like it, finally reached daylight." She turned toward us then, eyes glistening. "Mr. Hayes, Ms. Hayes, your pain built this place. Your courage built us." Clara blinked fast, holding her tears at bay. I didn't bother to hide mine. After the applause, Naomi approached me. She held out a small wooden box. "This is for you," she said. Inside was a single glass bottle filled with clear lake water. "The cleanup team at Greenfield sent it," she explained. "They said the lake's safe to drink now." "I thought you should have the first sip." I lifted the bottle carefully, sunlight refracting through it. It smelled like memory and rain. Clara laughed softly. "Careful, Dad. EPA might not approve that." I smiled and drank anyway. The water was cool, pure, startlingly alive. Helen's laughter echoed somewhere in the back of my mind. "See," she whispered. It forgave itself. Later, Clara and I walked outside. The air was warm and heavy with the scent of magnolia. The world felt slower here, more forgiving of age. She turned to me suddenly. "Do you think we've done enough?" I thought about the lake, the trials, the ghosts who had finally gone quiet. "No," I said, "but we've done something. And sometimes that's the miracle." Clara nodded. "You taught me that." "No," I said, smiling. "Your mother did." She took my arm as we walked toward the car. "Then maybe that's what legacy really is," she said. "Not what we leave behind, but who we leave standing." I squeezed her hand. "Exactly!" The sun dipped behind the courthouse, painting the sky the color of forgiveness. I looked back once more at the plaque by the door, Helen's name shining faintly in the fading light. For the first time, it didn't hurt to look. The church in Greenfield had been restored twice since everything happened. Once for structure, once for meaning. Now, every year, the town gathered there to honor the anniversary of the Greenfield Truth Act, the legislation born from the Ward Project that required full corporate transparency and environmental reporting. Clara was scheduled to speak that evening, but as the hall filled with neighbors, students, and journalists, she turned to me backstage and said, "You start this time." I shook my head. "My voice belongs to the past. Yours belongs to tomorrow." She smiled. "Then let them hear both." So I walked out. The crowd rose, not out of fame, but out of recognition. I was no hero, just a man who'd finally stopped running from himself. The lights were soft, the air warm. I stood behind the same podium where Helen had once confessed the truth that broke our lives open. I rested both hands on the wood, feeling the grooves beneath my fingertips, the old scars of a hall that had seen everything. "Good evening," I began. If you had told me 25 years ago that I'd be standing here, I would have laughed. And then left. Laughter rippled softly through the crowd. "I came here tonight to tell you something simple. Truth isn't a weapon. It's a light. The kind that blinds at first, but saves your sight later." I paused, glancing toward the front row. Clara, Ethan, and the faces of people who'd once been strangers but had become something more enduring. "I used to think family meant blood, but blood betrays. Blood runs cold. What lasts is respect and love. The kind that listens, even when the truth hurts. The kind that doesn't walk away when the world points fingers." My voice faltered, but I steadied it. "Family is who stays to help you face the truth, not who hides it with you." The room was utterly still. I looked toward the back where the old stained glass cast fragments of colored light across the floor. For a moment I imagined Helen there, standing in that light, smiling. "This building once held our shame," I continued. "Now it holds our forgiveness. That's what truth does. It turns prisons into places worth praying in." A few people clapped softly, then more. The sound grew, not thunderous, but warm, steady, alive. When the applause faded, Clara joined me at the podium. She placed a hand on my shoulder and whispered, "Mom would have been proud." I looked at her, my voice barely more than breath. She already is. We stood together as the choir began to sing, an old hymn Helen loved. The notes drifted up into the rafters and beyond, into a night that no longer carried weight. Through the stained glass, I saw the reflection of the lake glimmering in the distance. The water, the church, the people, all one story now. I leaned toward the microphone one last time. If you remember nothing else, I said, remember this. Family isn't blood, it's respect and love. The truth may break us, but love puts us back together again. The lights dimmed, and for a heartbeat, everything in the world felt forgiven.